Hey guys, welcome to the OzCert 2020 Cybersecurity Summit. My name is John, and I will be hosting Stream 4 over today and tomorrow. So, just a few housekeeping rules for everybody. If you're using, please try to use Google Chrome as a browser and try to keep the tabs to a minimum as well. The refresh button should work fairly well if anybody has any problems with the video freezing or anything like that. We have a Q&A functionality available in the right-hand panel there, and Dr. Sam has agreed to take on some questions after the session. So if you have any, please post them up there. If you use the raise hand function, one of our team members will help you out if you're having any difficulties. And if you wanted to go back to the foyer, there is a link in the general chat. So those are the things that you guys need for this. So our first speaker for Stream 4 is Dr. Sam Small, who is the current Chief Security Officer at ZeroFox. So Sam's got a ton of accolades here. I'm just going to go through a few of them. He is an incredibly decorated academic. So he's earned his doctorate from Johns Hopkins University, where he has also led an academic research team and founded several security-focused startups. On the commercial side, he's provided expert technology and security assessments to dozens of vendors and organizations. And he's also very well published as well. So he's got articles in Wired, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and New Scientist, to name a few. So today he's going to be talking about how to defeat online fraud outside of your virtual jurisdiction. So Dr. Small, welcome to the stage. For everyone else, please enjoy.
All right, thank you, John. Give me one moment here. My screen. This is my first time in Australia. I was hoping it wouldn't be this, but we'll have to do the virtual thing. So I hope everyone can see my screen. If you can't, please let me know, and let's begin. So so again, thank you, John, and welcome to our presentation. Other people's platforms defeating online fraud outside your virtual jurisdiction. I am Sam Small, and I am, in fact, the Chief Security Officer at ZeroFox, where we are a market leader in digital risk protection and public attack surface protection. I have some other team members here at this event. So if you want to know more about ZeroFox or have questions about my presentation, feel free to come visit us in the sponsor hub. So Kelly is here and Gabe are here, and Gabe is here as well. And they're very well versed in the topics I'll be discussing today. So what are we going to talk about today exactly? I think the first thing we need to do is get some definitions out of the way. So we're going to talk about digital risks and digital threats. So we're going to define those to make that a little crisper in your mind. It sounds vague on its face, but we'll break it down so everyone feels comfortable with what we mean there. And then I'll share some examples with you, and these are inspired by things I've seen with customers, but I have anonymized them, so no one will feel bad, hopefully. Then we'll talk about some of the common remediation challenges you have in dealing with digital threats, and we'll explain why those challenges are different than the types of mitigation and remediation challenges you might used to be dealing with more traditional security threats. So again, this will become more clear once we have that discussion about what a digital threat is. Then we'll move on to talking about some strategies, options, and tips when you pursue those remediation and mitigation activities yourself. And then finally, I'll provide some resources if you want to learn more about this topic, and we'll wrap up the discussion with some Q&A. So to begin, let's set some background. In 2011, Marc Andreessen of the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz published what's now considered a seminal essay, Why Software is Eating the World. And in it, he highlights how at the time, more traditional business models were being challenged and defeated by new digital-first approaches. So if you think back to that time frame, Uber was eating into the market share of traditional taxi companies, Airbnb was impacting the revenue of hotels, and websites like Priceline and Expedia were quickly putting travel agencies out of business. So in the world of enterprise software more specifically, though, we've seen something that I think is a bit tighter of a focus, and that is software as a service is eating the world. And so as you can see here, the rate of growth in enterprise SaaS spending is tremendous across all business functions, And there are plenty of good reasons for that. So businesses adopt SaaS applications because it allows their businesses to quickly adopt best-in-class solutions without long-term commitments, without the burdens of hosting or deployment or updates or management or concerns about uptime, and even dealing with security issues is usually left to the vendor by and large, except for maybe integrating with some of your other systems. So I think this growth is well explained by the features and capabilities that SaaS software brings us. And if we look briefly at some of the top SaaS applications by business function, you'll likely recognize many vendors that you use in your own organization here. I know when I glance at these logos, I see several things that we use internally at ZeroFox. And more broadly speaking, these SaaS platforms and digital platforms have also heavily influenced consumer activity. So it's not just in the enterprise that SaaS has really eaten this internet space. And so how does this consumer and public platform activity influence business strategy? It does so in a number of ways. So it's become a prominent aspect of driving engagement or awareness through social media campaigns, providing new channels for direct customer support. It helps to facilitate hiring and recruiting initiatives through platforms like LinkedIn, or it simply allows us to gauge consumer sentiment and brand enthusiasm. So with all this in mind, you may be asking yourself, isn't this a security conference? And what does this have to do with enterprise security or this session? And that's the right question to ask. My intent is for you to now recognize that the swift and mass adoption of SaaS products and digital platforms heavily impacts the enterprise risk landscape. And so to put that in a pithy statement, digital engagement leads to digital risk. And so with these changes, attackers are now able to plan and operate and benefit from attacks that occur completely outside the realm of your corporate systems, beyond the visibility of conventional auditing, logging, and alerting capabilities within your enterprise. So for instance, if someone is targeting your business or your customers on a digital platform or a third-party platform, you don't typically see alerts about that activity coming into your SIM like you would malicious activity from within your enterprise. And so it's these types of threats that we classify under the umbrella category of digital threats and consider within the subject of digital risk. So briefly, what do these attacks entail? We'll review some of the hallmark categories. So the first is impersonation. And impersonation threats include those where an attacker masquerades as a business and its brands or affiliated employees on digital platforms. And in this category, we often see impersonations targeting technical assets as well, like domain names, perhaps. And in the infrastructure category, we often see information and conversations about vulnerabilities or exploits or access to systems and infrastructure that your business may rely on, whether that, again, is within your core enterprise stack or out there hosted on cloud resources and other people's platforms. Next, we have malicious links and files. So with all of these collaborative platforms, there's a lot of sharing of information. And so, again, just like we might be used to dealing with these sorts of issues within our enterprise through email systems and things like that, we now have to deal with malicious links and files in other places as well, like perhaps Slack or Microsoft Teams, or again, on a business platform like LinkedIn, et cetera. Scams and fraud also run rampant on these digital platforms, especially those, scammers are especially interested in targeting B2C businesses because they can target the business as well as the customer base. So attackers here will leverage the interest and the customer confidence, the consumer confidence in your brand to entice users to engage in risky behavior. But these attacks, like I said earlier, will also often target company employees as well. If you think of like business email compromise, for instance, that would be an example. So as the adoption of collaboration features within cloud platforms increase, it often becomes more difficult to prevent asset exposure. So accurately tracking and protecting data we generate or leave behind on these sharing platforms is complex because each platform tends to have its own unique approach to access control. So if you think of like Google Drive versus Box versus Dropbox, they're all a bit different. And these permissions are notoriously easy to misconfigure. Even with our best behavior, these SaaS platforms roll out feature changes and system changes that can cause unintended and invisible consequences to us as well. These risks often fall hand in hand with compliance and regulation risks that organizations face. And finally, account takeovers on digital platforms or SaaS systems often catch security teams by surprise, and corporate data breaches and credentials are commonly dumped or sold in cybercrime forms like those found on the dark web. So what's common again among these hallmark categories are activities that are targeting businesses beyond their corporate systems and devices in the cloud, and too often businesses are left to scramble when these events occur as they struggle to control the situation or minimize business impact. And that's because too often people don't know what to do exactly at first. If there was a incident inside your enterprise on a employee's machine or on a server that you had control over, well, then you might isolate it from the network, you might quarantine some files, you might wipe a disk. But what do you do when there's an active threat targeting your business and it's on a social media site, or there's information that's been dumped on a paste site, et cetera? So typically, all too typically, businesses that aren't prepared to deal with these types of threats end up doing so reactively, and it really just prolongs the pain and the impact of the incident itself. So now that hopefully you better understand what we mean when we talk about digital threats, we're going to go over some examples here. Actually, so I have these taxonomy slides. We're going to skip that. If you're interested in a breakdown of our taxonomy of digital threats, please visit us at the Sponsor Hub or visit zerofox.com, and this is one of our white papers that's available. I'm sorry, I forgot I had some additional material before we get to the examples. So some of you might be saying to yourself, well, I hear what you're talking about, and I understand that you're calling these things digital threats. And typically I think of cyber threat intelligence when I think of these types of signals that are coming from outside my enterprise. And you're right, some cyber threat intelligence providers and feeds can provide information about threats that are targeting your business or your vertical, et cetera. And a good source of threat intelligence data will help you contextualize, enrich, and monitor for these incidents against the other investments you've already made in your security stack, like an antivirus vendor or your network security vendors or your ticketing system or your SIM. This threat data can help you to prioritize and manage your triage better. But cyber threat intelligence on its own is not enough to programmatically address these digital threats, and that's where this concept of digital risk protection comes in. So this digital risk protection is actually a product category that leverages threat intelligence, and it's a security program capability, much like AppSec or logging and auditing or authorization are part of the basic blocking and tackling within a security program. And this digital risk protection language is used by analysts like Forrester and Gartner. So if you'd like to learn more about that from an analyst perspective, I encourage you to look up those items. And when you think about how digital risk protection applies to different use cases within the enterprise, I just briefly listed probably the three most popular that I see in my work, and that is using this data and using this programmatic structure to address brand reputation and executive protection issues, addressing information security and data loss prevention issues, and gaining situational awareness of digital and physical risks. So taking those signals from these third-party platforms and this unstructured content and data, and turning it into information, or prioritizing information that's coming out of those places. And so by putting these things together, the relationship here gives you a number of advantages that allow you to deal with these issues in a timely fashion, and also remain vigilant and aware of changes to the landscape of risk that not only your business faces, but your vertical faces, or maybe that affects the technology and services that you use as well. So now we'll start with examples. So here we have an example of a fictitious bank that I created called Acme Bank, based in Chicago in the US. And we can see here, this is exactly what their customer login portal, their customer website looks like. It's got a login screen, etc. But the thing to notice here that's important is Acme Bank is actually hosted at acmebank.com, and this is not one of the domains. So here an attacker purchased acmebank.us, and they just wholesale ripped off the website of Acme Bank, and then they use this in phishing campaigns. So this was an example of one of those digital threats that's relying on brand impersonation. And there's a number of steps here. Obviously, they had to register the domain. They had to find a web host to host this content, and then obviously they had to launch some sort of lure or attack to draw people to this site. And once they're there, any number of things could happen that look like more traditional attacks, whether that's drive-by malware or credential stealing or other types of typical web-based threats. Here's another example that's even easier and cheaper to launch. So it doesn't cost anything to go on LinkedIn and pretend you're someone or a company. And it's very easy also by working with puppet accounts to have fake followers and things like that. So here's another example of brand abuse and impersonation on a digital platform that you wouldn't be aware of unless you were looking for it proactively or had a mechanism to receive notifications about these types of events. And why is this dangerous? A number of HR and recruitment scams are run in this way, but also current employees can be scammed by thinking that a fake employee who has an affiliation with this fake bank is communicating with them. And we've seen a number of cases where once trust is established, someone is convinced to perform an unsafe act. Here is an example of that exactly. So this is a business email compromise example. And again, going back to our first example, this is making use of our impersonating domain, the acmebank.us domain. So here, Pat Dawson is really an employee at Acme Bank. He's the VP of cyber risk. And so his colleague Jim recognizes his name and isn't paying so much attention to the domain at the end. And so if he implicitly trusts that this email actually is from Pat and not from an impersonator, then he may change his direct deposit payroll information as asked in the attacker's favor. Here's an example from a dark web post. So here, Acme Bank would be wise to be monitoring for this type of chatter on the dark web, because this character on the dark web, Johnny on the Spot, is claiming he has access to a huge breach of their customers' account information, and he's willing to sell it. And so by identifying this early, you can start your investigation to understand, do we think that this is actually a legitimate breach? If so, where could it have come from? And then you can investigate your logging and auditing to understand if those systems still have a vulnerability, and maybe identify the details around the actual exploitation, and start to also put an incident response plan into place around protecting those accounts and maybe notifying those customers if you have to. Finally, with the examples, we have a customer support example. So here we have a customer of Acme Bank complaining about an experience that she had trying to log in or use her account. And what it looks like on face value is that Acme Bank's customer support is responding to her post on social media to say, "We're really sorry, let's help you out." Unfortunately, this is an attacker's account, and even though it looks again like a legitimate Acme Bank account, and this link that they're asking Kim to click on, will inevitably lead to some terrible sort of event for her. She's already mad, now she's going to be even more mad. So this could lead to that first example we saw, that website, and she might think she needs to log in again, and then they've stolen her credentials. Or again, they could ask for other information, payment information, or deliver malware or ransomware. And if Kim uses the same password on Acme Bank as she uses in any other place, then all of those accounts are obviously vulnerable as well. So now that we've seen these types of examples, I don't have time in this talk for us to discuss how exactly you would find these types of examples or these types of threats, especially as they target your business. That's a conversation we can have maybe if you want to drop by our booth. That's something ZeroFox does. But instead, what we're going to talk about is, what do you do when you find these sorts of issues? if this isn't something that you've invested in your program. So typically, in this case, if I'm the cyber risk VP at Acme Bank, I have to send an email to the platform saying, there's this bad thing on your platform and it's targeting our business or our customers, and I'd like you to remove it. And I've included some artifacts to prove that this took place, and will you please take it down? And so any reasonable organization would hopefully do so, and many are obligated to by law or regulation, but they're not necessarily incentivized to do so quickly or in an efficient manner. In other situations, you have platforms that have forms to fill out instead. So it's very similar to that email example we just showed, but here they're trying to put you in the right bucket or bin to push you off to the right customer support team. And so after you hit submit or after you send that email, all you can really do is wait, unfortunately. And especially if you've never dealt with that particular platform before, because you've never had a threat hosted on that platform before, you may wait a long time to receive a response that says, oh, we need additional information, or you didn't send this to the right place. And again, in all that time, that threat is still active. So what I thought would be fun to do briefly is just go over some of the typical responses I've seen when you send in these kind of reports, so you can see what you're dealing with when you talk to these service providers. So in the first example here, I call this the nothing to see here response, where even though you've provided exact details and artifacts to prove your point, and maybe even pointed out the exact terms of service or EULA paragraph where the violation has occurred, they refuse to admit that something wrong has taken place, or engage with you on dealing with it. And so that's not the end of the road. I mean, you can have a conversation with them, but that's a tough place to start. And this second example is very similar to the first one. In this case, however, because maybe you reported this particular piece of content as a violation of intellectual property rights, they're rejecting it because they actually think it's some other type of infraction. And because you didn't label it with the type of infraction that they think it is, they kick it back to you. And so this is a little bit like Simon Says from my perspective, and that you didn't ask the right way, which is, again, a little bit silly. And this third response, this one blows my mind. Here, the platform is asking us to contact the malicious actor and maybe just ask them to remove the content themselves because it offends us. And I don't know any cyber criminals who would just stop attacking you because you asked nicely. In this next example, we have an issue that's bound to stop kind of any SOC operator in their tracks. Your tier 1 or tier 2 analysts are not likely to have experience obtaining a court order. So this is probably going to have to be escalated to legal, which is going to take some time. And even worse, when it's an Estonian court order, I don't know about you, but I'm completely out of water there. So so again, maybe your legal team would even be out of water there, and you have to ask yourself, is it even worth it at this point? What's going to happen once, how do I get this order? How long is it going to take? And then by that time, is the damage already done? This one's the worst one I've seen of all, the strangest one I've seen of all. Here, the platform provider has responded asking, this is in response to an impersonation on their platform. They've asked that the real person that is being impersonated, that we send them a picture of that person while they're holding their government-issued photo ID. So that's weird enough if it's me, but if I'm a tier 1 analyst and I have to go to my CFO or CEO and say, smile for the camera, cheese, hold up your license, and don't worry, I'll take care of this photo and be really gentle with it. That's a tough conversation to have. And then on top of that, they want you to email that picture with the government photo ID in it to the platform provider, which again, email isn't known as being the most secure place to save and secure documents and things like that, sensitive documents. So this highlights the immaturity in this space, and again, because we had that rapid adoption of SaaS platforms and products, we're still catching up, I think, with how to deal with threats and frauds and scams there. And so progress is made, but we're not where we need to be. So in terms of a response strategy, I'd like to now just briefly touch on some ideas for you to think about as you reflect on your program and its maturity here. So the first category to think about really is the target category. So here you have two options. Do you want to directly remove the threat, or do you want to mitigate the impact there? And so as we all know, the internet is multiplayered and complex. So while obviously if I can take someone's website down via the hosting provider and one of these takedown requests, that's great, and the content will be gone. But if I'm not able to do that, then maybe the next best thing is to go to the domain registrar and convince them that the domain is hosting malicious content or evidence of criminal activity, and maybe they can remove or revoke that name record in the meantime. So you have multiple options, and then additionally you have to think about your intent. So again, this kind of relates to the target, but you can either mitigate, which is again just to reduce the risk and the harm, or you can try to remediate, and that will depend on where the content is hosted and how the platform provider responds, et cetera. I'm speeding through this a little bit just because I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock and so we can get to some questions. So an example of indirect mitigation would be like when you visit a suspicious website in Chrome and you get this red warning screen kind of telling you that this site has been reported as suspicious. You probably don't want to go there. You can force your way through, but this will be enough to stop most people. And this will be enough, like in that example we looked at of Acme Bank's fake website. Hopefully this would be enough while you're also trying to get that domain record revoked, and you're also trying to get the web host to remove the content. This mitigation strategy will help in the meantime. And then finally, the last thing to think about is who the actor is. And so depending on what the issue is, sometimes that actor should be the SOC analyst, and sometimes it should be your legal team. And you just have to think about expectations and responsibilities and the communication channel between them both, because legal tends to be a large, heavy, slow-moving apparatus. But they have expertise that a SOC analyst wouldn't. So I wouldn't expect the legal team to be responsible for identifying and remediating these threats at a volume that my SOC analysts could, but I also don't expect my SOC analysts to chase down how to get a court order and manage cease and desists requests and things like that. So I don't have time to go through this workflow, but I wanted to have one example of a direct remediation. So this would be like a strategy for, or a playbook rather, for how you would go about managing the takedown process within your organization if you didn't have a vendor or a service to help you do so. So with that, I'm going to go over just some quick tips to wrap up here. So, so some brief points of advice. The first and the best thing you can do is to put your house in order. So you want to make sure you gather as much information as you can about your copyrights, your trademarks, what are the valid domains that your business has, not only for conducting business, but your marketing campaigns, et cetera. And knowing all those things and having all those things available to you will help you provide artifacts to platform providers, but also validate and verify reports when they come in. So again, if your marketing team launches a new campaign and didn't tell the security team that they bought some domains, you might think it's an impersonated domain and take it down by accident, and then the marketing team will be mad at you. The next thing you could do is to develop, share, and automate playbooks. So my general rule of thumb is if you have done something more than 2 times, it's time to start documenting the process and looking for efficiencies, especially around rote processes, because that's where automation can help. Next, as we just spoke about, make friends with legal. You want that line of communication open before you are dealing with a crisis. Additionally, you need to be persistent. So asking once never seems to work. So you need to consistently and persistently approach these platform providers with the proof of malicious activity and with these requests, because they are dealing with large volumes of these requests from tons of businesses and individuals. And again, they have no particular financial incentive to do these things in an efficient manner. So making noise sometimes is the only way to get their attention, unfortunately. And then finally, with your team and outside of your team, you want to set expectations and make contingency plans. The last thing you want to have happen is your CEO sees some sort of issue that's taken place on a social media network that involves your business, and he has some expectation because you're the security team and because when you have an incident internally, you can deal with them so quickly that you'll be able to do something about that risk outside of your enterprise just as quickly. And so, by setting those expectations ahead of time and saying, almost as a tabletop exercise, if this were to happen, this is our playbook, and this is what the time frame you can expect that to requires, that will help from making it look like your organization has poor performance or has failed to respond in a reasonable way. So with that, we'll see if there are any questions. And otherwise, please visit us at our virtual table or virtual booth. I left my email address here. I'm not a sales or marketing person at ZeroFox. I'm an operator and an evangelist. If you have questions about threat intelligence and digital risk protection, please email me. I'll be happy to answer them in a vendor neutral way, and I won't push you off to the sales team unless you want me to. But otherwise, Gabe and Kelly here know a lot about this space and our platform and our product. So if you'd like to know more about how ZeroFox addresses all these issues, please come visit us today. And it looks like maybe we have one question. Let's see. How do we get to the booth? Great question. I believe we're in Sponsor Hub 1, which when you're in the foyer, when you're in the main foyer, if you look all the way at the bottom of your screen, there'll be the buttons to go to the different streams and the sponsor hubs. So visit Sponsor Hub 1 and then look for our logo. We're at the top of the room, and Kelly and Gabe are enthused and waiting for you to drop by. So thank you, everyone. I'll hang out until you all leave. And if you're not too shy and you want to ask a question, I'll answer it. Otherwise, thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sam. We might give it another couple of minutes for questions before we jump off. Just
Sure.
to let you guys know, we've got a few sponsors at the Trade Hubs alongside ZeroFox. So we've got Hacktiv.io, CTF, Context, and SANS as well. So go and have a look during the breaks. But yeah.
Well, John, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. It was really good to watch.